The shot that changed everything came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night when Staff Sergeant Nancy Chen proved that steady hands matter more than steady nerves. But 3 months earlier, nobody at Camp Riverside would have believed that the woman they called Nervous Nancy behind her back would become the sniper who saved an entire reconnaissance team with a single, impossible bullet. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Nancy had earned her nickname honestly. At 26, she stood 5 feet 4 inches with dark hair always pulled back in a regulation bun and hands that seemed to shake whenever anyone important was watching. The tremor wasn't medical, wasn't permanent, but it appeared like clockwork during evaluations, briefings, or any moment when her performance was being scrutinized. Her fellow soldiers noticed, of course. They always noticed. She'd been stationed at the forward operating base in the Nevada desert for 18 months, long enough to establish herself as competent but unremarkable. The base served as a training facility for specialized operations, where elite units prepared for deployments that required precision, stealth, and nerves of steel. Nancy worked in the armory, maintaining weapons, tracking ammunition, and ensuring that every rifle, scope, and piece of equipment was perfectly calibrated. The irony wasn't lost on her that she spent her days working with the tools of marksmanship, while being considered too unreliable to use them in any meaningful capacity. Her official designation was Weapons Maintenance Specialist, a role that kept her close to the action but never part of it. She knew the specifications of every sniper rifle on the base, could adjust scopes to compensate for wind, elevation, and temperature variations, and understood ballistics better than most of the designated marksmen. But knowledge and opportunity were two different things entirely. The morning routine at Camp Riverside began at 0530 with physical training, followed by equipment checks and mission briefings. Nancy's day started earlier at 0430, when she would slip into the armory to conduct her own private inspections. She'd learned that the difference between adequate equipment and perfect equipment often meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Her thoroughness had prevented 3 equipment failures in the past year, but since the problems were caught before they became crises, her diligence went largely unnoticed. The base commander, Colonel Marcus Webb, ran his operation with military precision and an old-school mentality that valued proven track records over potential. At 52, Webb had served in 3 combat deployments and believed that high-stakes operations required personnel who had demonstrated unshakable composure under pressure. Nancy's visible nervousness during formal situations had branded her as unreliable in his assessment, regardless of her technical competence. The sniper training program at Camp Riverside was considered one of the most demanding in the military. Only soldiers who had demonstrated exceptional marksmanship skills, psychological stability, and physical endurance were selected for the intensive 12-week course. Applications were reviewed quarterly, and the selection process was ruthlessly competitive. Nancy had applied 4 times in 18 months and been rejected each time without even making it to the practical evaluation phase. The rejection letters were always professionally worded and diplomatically vague, citing the high standards required for the program and encouraging her to continue developing her skills in her current role. But Nancy understood the real message. Her nervousness during formal evaluations had disqualified her before she could demonstrate what she was actually capable of achieving. What her supervisors didn't know was that Nancy spent her off-duty hours at the base's auxiliary shooting range, a smaller facility used primarily for basic weapons qualification rather than advanced training. The range master, Sergeant First Class Robert Kim, was a veteran instructor who valued dedication over politics. He'd noticed Nancy's frequent presence at the range and her methodical approach to improving her skills. Kim had served as a sniper instructor for 8 years before transferring to basic training duties, and he recognized something in Nancy that others missed. While her hands might shake during formal evaluations, they were rock steady when she thought no one was watching. Her shooting groups were consistently tight, her adjustments for environmental conditions were textbook perfect, and her understanding of advanced marksmanship principles exceeded that of many qualified snipers. During one of their informal conversations, Kim had mentioned that the greatest snipers in history weren't necessarily the ones who never felt nervous, but the ones who learned to control their nervousness when it mattered most. Nancy took that advice to heart, spending hours practicing breathing techniques, meditation, and mental visualization exercises that helped her manage her anxiety responses. The base's elite sniper team, Calcine Phantom Squad, consisted of 4 highly trained specialists led by Master Sergeant David Park. The team regularly conducted advanced training exercises and was frequently deployed for sensitive operations, requiring precision long-range engagements. Nancy maintained their weapons, calibrated their scopes, and prepared their ammunition, but she remained invisible to them as anything other than support personnel. Park was a decorated marksman with confirmed kills from distances exceeding 1,200 meters. His team respected his expertise and followed his leadership without question. When they discussed marksmanship techniques or shared stories from previous deployments, Nancy would listen from her workstation in the armory, absorbing every detail about wind reading, target psychology, and the mental aspects of precision shooting. The team members, Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, Sergeant Tom Bradley, and Corporal Jake Matthews, were accomplished marksmen in their own right. They'd been selected for Phantom Squad based on their proven performance in combat situations and their ability to maintain composure under extreme pressure. They were aware of Nancy's presence in the armory, but they saw her as part of the infrastructure rather than a potential colleague. Nancy's reputation for nervousness had been established during her first month at Camp Riverside, when she'd been called upon to brief Colonel Webb on a weapons malfunction that had occurred during a training exercise. Standing in front of the assembled command staff, Nancy's hands had visibly trembled as she explained the technical details of the failure and her recommended solutions. Her analysis was thorough and accurate, but her physical nervousness overshadowed her competence. Since that initial incident, Nancy had been pigeonholed as someone who possessed technical knowledge but lacked the psychological fortitude required for high-pressure situations. The assessment wasn't entirely unfair. She did become visibly nervous when placed under scrutiny, but it was incomplete. Her nervousness was situational, triggered by formal evaluation scenarios rather than actual operational stress. The distinction mattered more than anyone realized, but Nancy had never been given the opportunity to demonstrate the difference. Her technical work spoke for itself through its quality and reliability, but technical work was invisible when it functioned correctly. She was valued for her behind-the-scenes contributions while being excluded from the visible roles that defined career advancement in the military. During her off-duty hours, Nancy studied advanced marksmanship texts, analyzed ballistics data, and practiced shooting techniques that went far beyond basic qualification requirements. She understood windage calculations, bullet drop compensation, and the physics of long-range shooting with a precision that impressed even experienced instructors like Sergeant Kim. Her theoretical knowledge was complemented by countless hours of practical application at the auxiliary range. The contradiction between her technical expertise and her perceived limitations created a constant source of frustration. Nancy knew she possessed the skills necessary for advanced marksmanship roles, but she also understood that military careers were built on demonstrated performance during formal evaluations rather than private achievements. Her challenge wasn't developing competence. She'd already achieved that. Her challenge was finding a way to demonstrate that competence when it would be recognized and valued. As autumn approached and the training cycle prepared to begin again, Nancy faced another decision about whether to submit her 5th application. For sniper training, previous rejections had been discouraging, but they hadn't diminished her belief in her own capabilities. She continued her private training regimen, maintained her technical expertise, and prepared for an opportunity that might never come through official channels. The base operated on predictable rhythms, but Nancy had learned that military life was punctuated by unexpected events that could change everything in an instant. Training exercises could become real emergencies, routine missions could encounter unforeseen complications, and personnel shortages could create opportunities for those prepared to seize them. She continued her preparation not because she expected recognition, but because she believed that readiness was its own form of professional responsibility. The pattern became unmistakable during the fall training cycle, when Phantom Squad returned from their latest field exercise with stories that Nancy heard secondhand through armory gossip. Master Sergeant Park had made a particularly challenging shot during a simulated hostage rescue, engaging a target at 800 meters in crosswind conditions that most marksmen would consider nearly impossible. The successful engagement had earned praise from visiting instructors and reinforced the team's reputation as the base's premier sniper unit. Nancy had prepared Park's rifle for that exercise, spending extra time calibrating the scope and selecting ammunition lots that would perform optimally in the anticipated weather conditions. Her preparation had contributed directly to his success, but her role remained invisible in the official reports and informal celebrations that followed. She'd grown accustomed to watching others receive recognition for achievements that her behind-the-scenes work had made possible. The monthly training evaluations provided another reminder of her status within the base hierarchy. While Phantom Squad members participated in advanced marksmanship competitions and tactical exercises, Nancy was assigned to equipment inspections and maintenance schedules. Her evaluations consistently rated her technical performance as exceptional, but they also noted her continued nervousness during formal presentations and her apparent lack of confidence in high-visibility situations. Sergeant First Class Williams, Nancy's direct supervisor in the armory, had attempted to help her overcome what he perceived as a confidence issue. During their regular one-on-one meetings, he would encourage her to speak up more during briefings and volunteer for assignments that would increase her visibility within the command structure. His advice was well-intentioned but missed the fundamental problem. Nancy's nervousness wasn't caused by lack of confidence, but by the pressure of being evaluated in artificial situations that bore little resemblance to actual operational requirements. Disconnect became particularly apparent during quarterly weapons qualifications, when Nancy's scores placed her consistently in the top 5% of all personnel on the base. Her marksmanship during these routine assessments was flawless, demonstrating precision and consistency that exceeded many members of specialized units. However, weapons qualification was considered a basic requirement rather than an indicator of advanced capability, so her exceptional performance generated little attention beyond notation in her personnel file. Colonel Webb's monthly command briefings included status updates from all major departments, including the armory. Nancy was responsible for compiling technical reports on equipment readiness, maintenance schedules, and supply requirements. These reports required her to stand before the assembled command staff and present detailed information about weapons, systems, ammunition inventory, and maintenance protocols. Without fail, her hands would begin trembling as soon as she approached the podium. The physical manifestation of her nervousness became so predictable that some officers would exchange knowing glances when Nancy's name appeared on the briefing schedule. Her technical presentations were invariably thorough and accurate, demonstrating comprehensive knowledge of complex weapon systems and maintenance procedures. But her visible anxiety overshadowed the content of her briefings, reinforcing perceptions about her unsuitability for high-pressure roles. Captain Sarah Mitchell, the base's psychological services officer, had observed Nancy during several briefings. and offered to work with her on anxiety management techniques. Their sessions focused on breathing exercises, visualization methods, and cognitive strategies for managing performance anxiety. The techniques helped Nancy feel more prepared for formal presentations, but they couldn't address the underlying issue. Her nervousness was a response to being evaluated in artificial situations rather than a general inability to handle pressure. The autumn training schedule included a series of joint exercises with visiting units from other installations. These exercises provided opportunities for personnel to demonstrate their capabilities in scenarios that simulated real-world operational requirements. Phantom Squad was scheduled to participate in several high-profile events, including a precision shooting competition that would be observed by senior commanders from multiple bases. Nancy's role in supporting these exercises involved extensive preparation of specialized equipment, including custom ammunition loads and precision-tuned rifles. That would give the base's marksmen every possible advantage. She spent weeks researching optimal load configurations for the expected range and weather conditions, consulting ballistics databases and conducting test firings to verify her calculations. Her preparation was meticulous and time-consuming, but it was also invisible to the personnel who would benefit from her work. The precision shooting competition attracted spectators from throughout the installation, including visiting dignitaries and senior officers who rarely observed routine training activities. Phantom Squad's performance would reflect directly on Camp Riverside's reputation for excellence, creating additional pressure for the participants and everyone involved in supporting them. Nancy felt the weight of that responsibility as she made final adjustments to the team's rifles and verified that every component met exacting specifications. Master Sergeant Park acknowledged Nancy's contribution with a brief nod of thanks as he accepted his prepared rifle, but the interaction was purely functional. He trusted her technical competence while remaining unaware of the depth of knowledge and preparation that informed her work. The relationship between sniper and armorer was professional but distant, defined by their respective roles rather than any recognition of shared expertise in marksmanship principles. During the competition itself, Nancy observed from the spectator area designated for support personnel. She watched Phantom Squad members engage targets at various distances, noting wind conditions and environmental factors that might affect bullet trajectory. Her understanding of the shooting conditions was as comprehensive as that of the competitors, but her perspective remained that of a technician rather than a participant. The competition results reinforced existing hierarchies within the base. Phantom Squad performed well, placing in the top tier of participating units and earning praise from the observing commanders. Their success validated the training programs and selection criteria that had placed them in their elite roles. Nancy's contribution to their performance remained invisible, acknowledged only through the brief equipment inspection that confirmed her rifles had functioned flawlessly throughout the event. Following the competition, informal discussions among the marksmen focused on techniques, equipment preferences, and the psychological challenges of shooting under observation. Nancy listened to these conversations from her position in the armory, absorbing insights about mental preparation and competition psychology that weren't covered in technical manuals. The discussions revealed that even elite marksmen experienced nervousness during high-stakes events, but they'd learned to channel that energy into improved focus rather than allowing it to disrupt their performance. The seasonal rotation of training personnel brought new faces to Camp Riverside, including several newly assigned marksmen who required orientation to the base's facilities and equipment standards. Nancy was responsible for familiarizing them with the Armory's inventory and maintenance procedures, a role that placed her in direct contact with soldiers who hadn't yet formed opinions about her capabilities based on her reputation for nervousness. One of the new arrivals, Staff Sergeant Nancy Chen, was a qualified sniper with deployment experience who'd been assigned to augment Phantom Squad's capabilities. During his orientation session, Chen asked detailed questions about ammunition selection, scope adjustment procedures, and the base's approach to environmental compensation. His questions demonstrated sophisticated understanding of marksmanship principles and created an opportunity for Nancy to share her technical knowledge in a less formal setting. Chen's response to Nancy's explanations was notably different from the polite acknowledgement she typically received from other marksmen. He asked follow-up questions that probed deeper into her understanding of ballistics theory and seemed genuinely interested in her insights about equipment optimization. The conversation extended well beyond the scheduled orientation time and covered topics that revealed Nancy's comprehensive grasp of advanced marksmanship concepts. At the conclusion of their discussion, Chen made an observation that surprised Nancy with its directness. He noted that her technical knowledge appeared to exceed that of many qualified snipers he'd worked with during his career, and he questioned why she wasn't participating in the advanced training programs rather than simply supporting them. Nancy's explanation about her application rejection seemed to puzzle Chen, who suggested that technical competence and operational capability weren't always aligned with formal evaluation results. The conversation with Chen planted a seed of doubt about the fairness of the selection processes that had repeatedly excluded Nancy from advancement opportunities. His outside perspective highlighted the disconnect between her demonstrated expertise and her assigned role, suggesting that internal biases might be preventing optimal utilization of available talent. Nancy began to consider whether her repeated rejections reflected genuine unsuitability for advanced roles or simply institutional blindness to capabilities that didn't fit expected patterns. The doubt grew stronger when Chen mentioned that some of the most effective snipers he'd served with had been individuals who brought unconventional backgrounds or perspectives to their roles. He described marksmen who'd overcome initial skepticism about their suitability through exceptional performance when given opportunities to prove themselves. His story suggested that the qualities that made someone an effective sniper weren't always apparent during formal evaluations, and that real-world performance often differed significantly from assessment results. As winter approached and another application cycle prepared to open, Nancy faced a familiar decision about whether to submit her credentials for consideration once again. Previous rejections had followed predictable patterns, but Chen's observations had introduced new variables into her thinking. Perhaps persistence would eventually overcome institutional resistance, or perhaps her energy would be better invested in finding alternative paths to demonstrate her capabilities. The discovery came during a routine inventory audit in November, when Nancy uncovered a discrepancy that would have compromised an upcoming joint training exercise. While cross-referencing ammunition logs against physical inventory, she noticed that several lots of match-grade .338 Lapua Magnum rounds showed inconsistent powder charges in their manufacturing specifications. The variance was subtle, barely noticeable in the documentation, but significant enough to affect accuracy at extended ranges. Nancy spent 3 days analyzing the ballistic data, comparing lot numbers against performance specifications, and calculating the potential impact on trajectory at various distances. Her analysis revealed that using the affected ammunition could result in point-of-impact shifts of up to 6 inches at 1,000 meters, enough to cause mission failure in precision shooting scenarios. She documented her findings in a detailed report that included recommendations for alternative ammunition sources and testing protocols to prevent similar issues. When Nancy presented her findings to Sergeant Williams, his initial reaction was skepticism. The ammunition had passed standard quality control inspections and carried manufacturer certifications that should have guaranteed its reliability. Nancy's concerns appeared to be based on mathematical projections rather than observed performance problems, leading Williams to question whether she was overthinking a minor documentation discrepancy. Nancy requested permission to conduct test firings to verify her calculations, but Williams declined, citing the cost of expending match-grade ammunition for what he considered unnecessary verification. The upcoming joint exercise was only 2 weeks away, and there wasn't sufficient time to requisition replacement ammunition, even if Nancy's concerns proved valid. Williams decided to proceed with the existing inventory while noting Nancy's objections. In the official record that the decision troubled Nancy deeply, but challenging Williams's judgment would have constituted insubordination and likely damaged her career prospects even further. Instead, she began conducting her own private research. Using the auxiliary shooting range during off-duty hours, Sergeant Kim allowed her to test small quantities of the questionable ammunition, provided she documented her results and shared her findings with him. The test results confirmed Nancy's worst fears. At distances beyond 600 meters, the affected ammunition consistently produced groups that were significantly larger than specifications suggested. The point-of-impact variations weren't random, but followed predictable patterns that corresponded exactly to the powder charge inconsistencies Nancy had identified in the manufacturing data. Her mathematical projections had been accurate, and the ammunition was indeed unsuitable for precision shooting applications. Nancy presented her test results to Williams, accompanied by detailed ballistic calculations and photographic evidence of the degraded accuracy. This time, Williams couldn't dismiss her concerns as theoretical speculation, but the timing created an impossible situation. The joint exercise was scheduled to begin in 5 days, with visiting units already en route to Camp Riverside. Canceling or postponing the exercise would be a significant embarrassment for Colonel Webb and could damage the base's reputation for operational readiness. Williams found himself caught between acknowledging Nancy's technical expertise and avoiding a crisis that could reflect poorly on his supervision of the armory. He decided to implement a compromise solution. The questionable ammunition would be segregated and used only for training scenarios that didn't require maximum precision, while priority would be given to requisitioning replacement rounds for the most critical shooting events. The compromise satisfied administrative requirements, but ignored the underlying problem that Nancy had identified. Some precision shooting would still occur using compromised ammunition, creating risks that could affect exercise outcomes and potentially endanger participants if live-fire scenarios were involved. Nancy understood the political pressures that had influenced Williams's decision, but she also recognized that technical problems couldn't be solved through administrative compromises. Nancy's growing reputation as someone who identified problems that others missed created an unexpected side effect, increased scrutiny of her work and motivations. Some personnel began questioning whether her attention to detail reflected genuine expertise or obsessive perfectionism that created unnecessary complications. The distinction mattered because expertise was valued while obsessiveness was viewed as a character flaw that could disrupt smooth operations. The skepticism became apparent during a staff meeting where Williams briefed the command team about ammunition supply issues. He mentioned Nancy's identification of the manufacturing discrepancies, but framed her concerns as examples of excessive caution rather than professional competence. His presentation suggested that while Nancy's thoroughness was commendable, it sometimes led to overthinking problems that had practical solutions. Captain Jennifer Torres, the base operations officer, questioned whether Nancy's concerns about ammunition quality were based on realistic operational requirements or theoretical standards that exceeded actual mission needs. Her questions implied that Nancy might be applying inappropriate precision standards to equipment that was adequate for its intended purposes. The suggestion that Nancy didn't understand practical requirements versus theoretical ideals was particularly frustrating because it dismissed her extensive knowledge of real-world shooting applications. Master Sergeant Park attended the briefing as Phantom Squad's representative and offered a different perspective on Nancy's findings. He acknowledged that precision ammunition requirements for sniper operations were extremely demanding and that seemingly minor quality variations could have significant impact on mission success. His comments provided some validation for Nancy's technical analysis, but they also reinforced the perception that her expertise was limited to theoretical knowledge rather than practical application. The joint exercise proceeded as scheduled, with participating units rotating through various training scenarios designed to test their capabilities under realistic conditions. Nancy monitored the precision shooting events carefully, noting performance results and correlating them with her predictions about ammunition quality impacts. Her unofficial tracking revealed accuracy problems that corresponded exactly to her earlier calculations, but the issues were attributed to environmental conditions and shooter performance rather than equipment deficiencies. During one particularly challenging shooting scenario, Staff Sergeant Chen experienced unexplained accuracy problems that prevented him from achieving qualifying scores. The misses occurred at extended ranges where Nancy's ammunition analysis had predicted the greatest impact, but Chen attributed his performance issues to unfamiliarity with the base's equipment and environmental conditions. Nancy recognized the true cause but couldn't intervene without violating protocol and potentially embarrassing Chen in front of evaluating officers. After the exercise concluded, Nancy approached Chen privately to discuss his shooting experience and the factors that might have affected his performance. She shared her ammunition analysis and explained how the quality variations could have contributed to his accuracy problems. Chen's response was immediate recognition. The performance issues he'd experienced matched exactly the patterns Nancy had predicted, and his extensive shooting experience allowed him to distinguish between equipment problems and personal performance factors. Chen's validation of Nancy's technical analysis provided the external confirmation she'd been seeking, but it also highlighted the institutional barriers that prevented her expertise from being properly utilized. Her knowledge was extensive and accurate, but the formal channels for sharing that knowledge were filtered through supervisors who questioned her credibility based on her reputation for nervousness rather than her demonstrated competence. The conversation with Chen evolved into broader discussions about marksmanship theory, ballistics calculations, and the practical challenges of achieving precision in field conditions. Nancy found herself explaining complex concepts about environmental compensation, equipment optimization, and shooting psychology to someone whose operational experience allowed him to appreciate the depth and accuracy of her knowledge. These informal mentoring sessions occurred during off-duty hours and remained unknown to the official command structure. Chen began consulting Nancy about equipment preferences, ammunition selection, and technical modifications that could improve his shooting performance. Her recommendations proved consistently accurate, leading to measurable improvements in his training scores and increased confidence in challenging shooting scenarios. The collaborative relationship demonstrated that Nancy's expertise could enhance the performance of elite marksmen when given appropriate opportunities for application. The unofficial mentoring relationship with Chen created an unexpected development in Nancy's understanding of her own capabilities. For the first time, she was working directly with an operational sniper who valued her technical knowledge and sought her input on practical shooting challenges. The experience revealed that her expertise extended beyond theoretical knowledge to practical applications that could directly improve mission outcomes. Chen suggested that Nancy's combination of technical expertise and comprehensive understanding of marksmanship principles made her uniquely qualified for advanced roles, regardless of her performance during formal evaluations. He pointed out that many successful snipers had overcome initial doubts about their suitability through exceptional performance when given opportunities to prove themselves in realistic scenarios rather than artificial testing environments. The suggestion that her formal evaluation results might not accurately reflect her operational potential prompted Nancy to reconsider her approach to career advancement. Perhaps persistence in pursuing traditional paths wasn't the optimal strategy. For demonstrating capabilities that didn't fit conventional assessment criteria, Chen's perspective suggested that proving competence through practical application might be more effective than seeking validation through formal recognition processes. As winter deepened and the base settled into its seasonal training rhythm, Nancy continued her private preparation while exploring alternative strategies for demonstrating her qualifications. Her technical expertise was undeniable, her theoretical knowledge was comprehensive, and her practical skills were being validated through her work with Chen. The missing element was an opportunity to apply those capabilities in situations where their value would be apparent to decision-makers who controlled advancement opportunities. Nancy began researching precedents for personnel who had transitioned from technical roles to operational positions, looking for patterns that might suggest viable pathways for her own career development. The research revealed that such transitions were possible, but typically required exceptional circumstances that created urgent needs for specialized capabilities that existing personnel couldn't fulfill. The whispers started in the mess hall during the second week of December. Nancy first noticed them when conversations would pause as she approached tables, then resume in hushed tones after she passed. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable. Her colleagues were discussing something about her that they didn't want her to overhear directly. The source of the speculation became clear when Private Johnson, one of the newer armory assistants, mentioned that several personnel had been asking questions about Nancy's off-duty activities. Specifically, they wanted to know why she spent so much time at the auxiliary shooting range and what kind of training she was conducting there. The questions weren't hostile, but they carried undertones of curiosity about whether her activities were appropriate for someone in her position. Sergeant Williams called Nancy into his office the following Monday for what he described as a routine check-in, but his questions revealed the real purpose of the meeting. He asked about her relationship with Staff Sergeant Chen and the nature of their frequent conversations about marksmanship techniques. Williams seemed particularly interested in whether Nancy was providing informal instruction to qualified personnel, which could be interpreted as overstepping her assigned responsibilities. Nancy explained that Chen had sought her technical expertise regarding equipment optimization and ammunition selection, areas that fell clearly within her professional competence as a weapons specialist. She emphasized that their discussions focused on ballistics theory and equipment maintenance rather than operational tactics or shooting instruction. Williams accepted her explanation but cautioned her about maintaining appropriate boundaries between technical support and operational guidance. The conversation with Williams revealed that Nancy's growing relationship with Chen had attracted attention from personnel who questioned whether she was attempting to insert herself into roles for which she wasn't qualified. The concern wasn't about the quality of her technical advice, which was acknowledged to be excellent, but about the perception that she might be using her expertise to gain informal access to training and opportunities that had been formally denied to her. Captain Torres requested a meeting with Nancy the following week to discuss what she termed professional development concerns. The session took place in Torres's office with Williams present as Nancy's immediate supervisor. Torres explained that several personnel had raised questions about Nancy's apparent ambitions beyond her assigned role, and she wanted to ensure that Nancy understood the importance of focusing her efforts on areas where she could make the most significant contribution. Torres's questions were carefully phrased but clearly designed to determine whether Nancy harbored unrealistic expectations about career advancement. She asked about Nancy's long-term goals, her understanding of the qualifications required for specialized roles, and her perspective on the relationship between technical expertise and operational capability. The subtext was obvious. Nancy needed to accept the limitations of her current position and stop pursuing advancement opportunities that were beyond her reach. Nancy responded diplomatically, emphasizing her commitment to excellence in her assigned duties while maintaining that continued professional development was important for all military personnel. She avoided direct challenges to Torres's implications, but made it clear that she wouldn't voluntarily limit her knowledge or skills to match narrow job descriptions. The meeting concluded with Torres expressing confidence in Nancy's technical abilities while encouraging her to focus on maximizing her impact within her current role. The meeting with Torres marked a turning point in how Nancy was perceived within the command structure. Previously, her nervousness during formal evaluations had been seen as a personal limitation that prevented advancement, but didn't reflect negatively on her character. Now her pursuit of knowledge and skills beyond her assigned duties was being interpreted as evidence of poor judgment or unrealistic ambitions that could disrupt unit cohesion. The shift in perception became apparent during the monthly Armory briefing, when Colonel Webb made pointed comments about the importance of personnel understanding their roles and responsibilities within the larger organizational structure. His remarks weren't directed specifically at Nancy, but they occurred immediately after her presentation about equipment readiness, and the timing suggested a connection that other attendees would have noticed. Nancy's hands trembled more than usual during that briefing, not because of her typical nervousness, but because she recognized that her professional reputation was being subtly undermined. The trembling was noticed by the attending officers, reinforcing existing perceptions about her unsuitability for high-pressure situations, while obscuring the real source of her anxiety. The irony was bitter. She was being criticized for the same dedication that made her exceptionally competent at her job. The isolation deepened when Chen was reassigned to temporary duty with a visiting training unit, removing Nancy's primary source of professional validation and collaborative learning. His departure was presented as a routine rotation, but the timing coincided suspiciously with the recent concerns about their working relationship. Nancy suspected that his reassignment was intended to limit her access to operational personnel, who might encourage her advancement aspirations. Without Chen's regular consultations, Nancy's days became more solitary and focused entirely on routine maintenance tasks. She continued her private training at the auxiliary range, but the sessions felt different now that she knew they were being monitored and potentially judged as inappropriate for someone in her position. The knowledge that her dedication was being viewed with suspicion rather than appreciation added an element of defiance to her continued preparation. Sergeant Kim, the range master, noticed the change in Nancy's demeanor during her training sessions and asked whether everything was acceptable with her duties. Nancy explained the recent developments without directly criticizing her supervisors, but Kim understood the implications immediately. He'd seen similar situations before, where exceptional personnel were held back by institutional biases that prioritized conformity over capability. Kim shared his own experience of being overlooked for advancement early in his career because his unconventional background didn't fit traditional promotion patterns. He'd eventually proven himself through exceptional performance, but only after years of frustration and missed opportunities. His advice to Nancy was to continue developing her skills while maintaining professional relationships, because opportunities for demonstration would eventually arise. The conversation with Kim provided some comfort, but it also highlighted the reality that Nancy's situation might persist for years without resolution. Military careers were built on documented achievements and formal recognition, not on private excellence that occurred outside official channels. Her technical expertise was undeniable, but expertise without opportunity for application had limited career value. The Armory's workload increased during the winter training cycle, requiring Nancy to manage equipment preparation for multiple units simultaneously. The demanding schedule provided welcome distraction from her professional frustrations, while demonstrating her ability to handle complex logistics under pressure. Her performance remained flawless, but the excellence was expected rather than exceptional, generating no special recognition or advancement opportunities. During one particularly busy week, Nancy discovered another ammunition quality issue that could have affected an important training exercise. This time, she documented her findings more carefully and presented them through formal channels with mathematical analysis and supporting data that couldn't be dismissed as overthinking. Williams accepted her report and took corrective action, but his acknowledgement was purely professional, lacking any recognition of the expertise required to identify such subtle problems, the pattern of identifying problems that others missed, while receiving minimal credit for preventing potential failures became increasingly frustrating. Nancy's work prevented equipment malfunctions, safety hazards, and mission failures, but prevention was invisible success that generated no recognition. She began to understand that her greatest contributions would always remain unnoticed because successful prevention looked like nothing happening. The psychological impact of sustained professional isolation began affecting Nancy's confidence in ways that her formal evaluation nervousness never had. She started questioning whether her technical expertise was as comprehensive as she believed, or whether her supervisor's skepticism reflected real limitations in her knowledge. The doubt was particularly troubling because it undermined the foundation of her professional identity. Nancy's sister called during one of her lowest moments, asking about her career progress and whether she was enjoying her military service. Nancy found herself unable to articulate the frustration she felt about being recognized for her limitations while her strengths were ignored. Her sister's well-meaning encouragement about perseverance and proving herself felt hollow when the systems for recognition seemed designed to exclude her regardless of her performance. The conversation with her sister crystallized Nancy's understanding that she faced a choice between accepting her current limitations or finding ways to demonstrate her capabilities outside formal channels. The military valued documented achievements and official recognition, but it also respected results that contributed to mission success. Perhaps her focus needed to shift from seeking permission to prove herself toward creating situations where her capabilities would become undeniably apparent. As winter continued and the base prepared for spring training exercises, Nancy began researching opportunities that might allow her to demonstrate her skills in contexts where results would speak louder than evaluations. The research revealed that crisis situations often created opportunities for personnel to exceed their normal roles, particularly when specialized expertise was needed urgently and conventional solutions proved inadequate. Nancy realized that her extensive preparation might be most valuable not in pursuit of formal advancement, but in readiness for unexpected situations, where her unique combination of technical knowledge and practical skills could make decisive differences. The recognition might come not through traditional channels, but through exceptional performance. When circumstances demanded capabilities that existing personnel couldn't provide, the formal restriction came in February through an official memorandum, signed by Colonel Webb and countersigned by Captain Torres. Nancy received the document during her morning briefing with Sergeant Williams, who presented it with obvious discomfort but unwavering professional compliance. The memorandum outlined new guidelines for Armory personnel regarding their scope of responsibilities and professional development activities. The language was bureaucratic and carefully neutral, but the message was unmistakable. Armory specialists were to focus exclusively on their assigned maintenance and logistics duties, with any additional training or skill development requiring prior approval from their chain of command. The memorandum specifically prohibited Armory personnel from providing unofficial technical consultation to operational units and restricted their access to advanced training materials that weren't directly related to their primary responsibilities. Nancy read the document twice before fully comprehending its implications. Her informal consultations with Chen and other marksmen were now explicitly forbidden. Her self-directed study of ballistics texts and marksmanship principles was subject to supervisory approval. Even her use of the auxiliary shooting range would need to be justified as directly related to her weapons maintenance duties rather than personal skill development. Williams explained that the new guidelines were part of a broader initiative to ensure that all personnel maintained appropriate focus on their assigned roles. He emphasized that the restrictions weren't punitive measures directed at Nancy specifically, but rather proactive policies designed to prevent potential conflicts of interest and maintain clear organizational boundaries. His explanation felt rehearsed, suggesting that he'd been coached on how to present the changes as positive developments rather than limitations. The memorandum included a section requiring Nancy to submit written requests for any training activities beyond basic weapons maintenance procedures. These requests would be evaluated based on their relevance to her assigned duties and their potential impact on her primary responsibilities. The approval process would involve review by both Williams and Torres, creating multiple opportunities for denial and ensuring that any advanced training would be carefully controlled. Nancy's initial reaction was a mixture of anger and betrayal. She dedicated herself to excellence in her assigned duties while pursuing additional knowledge that enhanced her ability to serve the unit effectively. Her technical expertise had prevented equipment failures, improved operational readiness, and contributed to mission success in ways that were documented and verifiable. The new restrictions essentially punished her for the same dedication that made her exceptionally valuable to the organization. The psychological impact was more severe than the practical limitations. Nancy realized that her supervisors viewed her pursuit of knowledge as a threat rather than an asset, suggesting fundamental disagreement about the nature of professional development and career advancement. The restriction implied that her ambitions were inappropriate and that her understanding of her own potential was unrealistic and potentially disruptive. Williams attempted to soften the impact by suggesting that the restrictions might be temporary, measures designed to address specific concerns that had been raised by higher command. He hinted that Nancy's compliance with the new guidelines could lead to their eventual relaxation, provided she demonstrated appropriate focus on her assigned responsibilities. The implication was that her cooperation with limitations might eventually earn her permission to exceed them. Nancy recognized the manipulation inherent in Williams's suggestion, but also understood the reality of her situation. Direct resistance to the new guidelines would constitute insubordination and likely result in formal disciplinary action that could end her military career. Her only viable option was compliance, at least until she could identify alternative approaches to demonstrating her capabilities. The restriction on access to advanced training materials was particularly frustrating because it prevented Nancy from continuing the self-directed education that had made her exceptionally competent at her job. Her knowledge of ballistics theory, environmental compensation, and precision shooting techniques had been developed through careful study of texts and references that were now potentially off-limits without specific approval. Nancy submitted her first formal request for training materials the following week, asking for permission to continue studying ballistics references that directly related to ammunition selection and scope calibration procedures. Her request was detailed and professionally written, emphasizing the connection between advanced ballistics knowledge and her ability to optimize equipment performance for operational users. Torres denied the request after a week of consideration, stating that Nancy's current level of technical knowledge was adequate for her assigned responsibilities and that additional study might distract from her primary duties. The denial was accompanied by suggestions for focusing her professional development on administrative skills and logistics management rather than technical specialization that exceeded her role requirements. The denial confirmed Nancy's suspicions that the restrictions were designed to prevent her advancement rather than optimize her current performance. Her technical expertise was being actively limited to ensure that she remained within predetermined boundaries, regardless of her potential contributions to unit effectiveness. The institutional message was clear. Exceptional competence was valuable only when it remained contained within appropriate organizational limits. Nancy's relationship with her colleagues became increasingly strained as word of the restrictions spread throughout the armory. Some personnel viewed the new guidelines as necessary corrections to address Nancy's overreaching ambitions, while others recognized them as unfair limitations on someone whose expertise exceeded that of many personnel in more advanced positions. The division created tension within the unit and made normal working relationships uncomfortable. Private Johnson, who had previously admired Nancy's technical knowledge, began treating her with obvious caution, avoiding conversations about equipment, optimization, or ballistics theory that might be interpreted as seeking unauthorized consultation. His changed behavior reflected broader uncertainty about what types of professional interaction were now considered appropriate with Nancy. Given the formal restrictions on her role, Sergeant Kim expressed private frustration about the limitations placed on Nancy's training activities at the auxiliary range. As rangemaster, he valued her dedication and recognized her exceptional shooting skills, but he was also required to enforce the new guidelines that restricted her access to facilities and equipment. Kim's position created a conflict between his professional obligations and his recognition of Nancy's capabilities. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The restrictions extended to Nancy's informal mentoring relationships with newer personnel who had previously sought her technical guidance. Junior armory specialists were discouraged from asking advanced questions about equipment optimization or maintenance procedures that exceeded basic protocols. The limitation prevented Nancy from sharing knowledge that could improve overall unit competence and reduced her ability to contribute to professional development within her department. Nancy found herself increasingly isolated within her own workplace, surrounded by equipment she understood better than anyone else, but forbidden from applying that knowledge in ways that extended beyond narrowly defined maintenance tasks. Her expertise was simultaneously valued for its practical benefits and feared for its implications about advancement potential that challenged existing organizational hierarchies. The monthly performance evaluation session with Williams became an exercise in careful navigation of the new restrictions. Nancy's technical performance remained exceptional, but Williams now focused primarily on her compliance with role limitations rather than her contributions to mission effectiveness. The evaluation criteria had shifted from measuring excellence to measuring conformity. Williams emphasized Nancy's need to demonstrate acceptance of her assigned role and show appropriate focus on duties that fell clearly within her prescribed responsibilities. He suggested that her previous pursuit of advanced knowledge had created perceptions about unrealistic career expectations that needed to be corrected through consistent adherence to current limitations. Nancy's responses during the evaluation were carefully measured, acknowledging the new guidelines while avoiding any statements that could be interpreted as resistance or disagreement. She emphasized her commitment to excellence within her assigned role while carefully avoiding any mention of her continued belief in her potential for advancement. The conversation felt like a performance designed to demonstrate compliance rather than evaluate competence. The evaluation concluded with Williams expressing confidence in Nancy's ability to succeed within appropriate boundaries, provided she maintained focus on her current responsibilities. His comments were professionally supportive, but carried clear implications about the consequences of deviating from prescribed limitations. Nancy understood that her career progression would depend on her willingness to accept rather than challenge the restrictions that had been placed on her development. As winter transitioned toward spring, Nancy adapted to her new constraints while privately maintaining her commitment to readiness for opportunities that might arise despite institutional barriers. The restrictions had clarified the official position on her advancement potential, but they had also strengthened her resolve to prove that exceptional competence couldn't be permanently contained by administrative limitations, Nancy began developing alternative strategies for maintaining her skills and knowledge within the constraints of the new guidelines. She focused on aspects of professional development that couldn't be easily restricted, such as physical conditioning and mental preparation techniques that enhanced performance under pressure. Her preparation became more focused but no less intensive, designed to ensure readiness for circumstances that might create opportunities despite formal limitations. The restriction period became a test of Nancy's persistence and creativity in pursuing excellence despite institutional resistance. She understood that proving her capabilities would require exceptional circumstances that overwhelmed normal organizational constraints, creating situations where results mattered more than regulations and where competence was valued regardless of its source. The emergency alert pierced the desert dawn at 0437 hours on March 15th, shattering the routine quiet that typically preceded the morning shift change. Nancy was already awake in her quarters. Having spent another restless night reviewing technical manuals, she was no longer officially permitted to study. The klaxon's urgent wail sent personnel scrambling toward their duty stations as base communications crackled with fragmentary reports of a developing crisis. Initial radio traffic was chaotic and incomplete, but Nancy gathered that a reconnaissance patrol had encountered unexpected enemy contact during what should have been a routine surveillance mission. The patrol, Calcine Outpost 7, consisted of 4 specialists conducting intelligence gathering in the mountainous terrain, 40 kilometers northeast of Camp Riverside. Their last coherent transmission had reported taking fire from an unknown number of hostiles before communications went silent. Nancy made her way to the armory to secure equipment and prepare for potential deployment of rescue assets. The base was transitioning rapidly from normal operations to emergency response protocols, with personnel manning command centers, preparing aircraft, and organizing search and rescue capabilities. The urgency was palpable as commanders recognized that American soldiers were in immediate danger and required extraction from hostile territory. Colonel Webb's voice echoed through the base communication system, announcing that Outpost 7 had been compromised and that immediate rescue operations were being organized. The patrol's last known position was in terrain that would challenge conventional extraction methods, requiring specialized approaches that could operate effectively in mountainous conditions with limited landing zones and potential enemy presence. The command center became the focal point of rescue planning as officers coordinated with air assets, ground units, and intelligence sources to develop options for reaching the endangered patrol. Nancy observed the activity from her position in the armory, monitoring communications while preparing equipment that might be needed for the rescue operation. Her role kept her informed about developing plans while excluding her from decision-making processes. Phantom Squad was immediately activated as the primary rescue asset, with Master Sergeant Park leading the team in planning approaches to the crisis zone. The mountainous terrain presented significant challenges for conventional helicopter insertion, with limited landing areas and elevation changes that would complicate extraction under fire. Park's team needed to develop tactics that could overcome environmental obstacles, while dealing with unknown enemy capabilities. Weather reports added complexity to the rescue planning as meteorologists predicted deteriorating conditions that would limit visibility and increase flight risks. Cloud cover was expected to reduce aerial reconnaissance effectiveness, while wind patterns could affect helicopter operations and precision shooting if long-range engagements became necessary. The window for successful rescue operations was narrowing as conditions worsened. Staff Sergeant Chen had returned from his temporary assignment the previous week and was immediately integrated into the rescue planning as an additional sniper asset. His experience with mountainous operations and precision shooting made him valuable for scenarios that might require long-range support for extraction operations. Nancy watched him reviewing topographical maps and discussing approach options with Park, wishing she could contribute her own extensive knowledge of the terrain. The reconnaissance patrol situation became clearer as intelligence analysts pieced together fragmentary communications and satellite imagery. Outpost 7 appeared to be pinned down in a defensive position on a ridge line, surrounded by hostile forces that prevented movement toward potential extraction points. The patrol's ammunition and medical supplies were limited, creating time pressure that demanded immediate action rather than extended planning. Initial rescue attempts using conventional helicopter approaches failed when aircraft encountered heavy ground fire that forced them to abort their missions. The enemy presence was more substantial than initial intelligence had suggested, with positions that commanded approaches to the ridge where Outpost 7 was trapped. Conventional tactics were proving inadequate for the terrain and threat environment. Park's assessment of the situation was grim as he briefed Colonel Webb on the challenges facing rescue operations. The enemy had established overlapping fields of fire that covered all accessible landing zones, while the terrain limited ground approaches to narrow routes that could be easily defended. Phantom Squad could potentially provide overwatch support, but they would need firing positions that could dominate the enemy positions without exposing themselves to counterfire. The discussion in the command center focused on identifying suitable positions for sniper support that could suppress enemy fire long enough to allow helicopter extraction. Topographical analysis revealed several potential locations, but they were at extreme range from the target area and would require exceptional shooting skills to be effective. The distances involved were at the limits of what even experienced snipers could manage reliably. Nancy listened to the tactical discussions with growing frustration as she recognized that her knowledge of the terrain could contribute significantly to rescue planning. She'd studied the ridge systems in that area extensively and understood the sight lines, wind patterns, and elevation factors that would affect long-range shooting. Her analysis could help identify optimal positions and engagement parameters, but the recent restrictions prevented her from offering input. Chen approached Nancy during a brief lull in planning activities, asking for her technical assessment of ammunition performance at the extreme ranges being considered for sniper support. His question was carefully phrased to focus on ballistics theory rather than tactical advice, staying within the boundaries of her permitted technical consultation while seeking information that could affect mission success. Nancy provided detailed analysis of bullet trajectory, environmental compensation, and accuracy expectations at the ranges under consideration. Her calculations revealed that successful engagements would require nearly perfect conditions and exceptional shooting skills, with minimal margin for error in range estimation or wind reading. The technical requirements were at the absolute limits of both equipment and human capability. The conversation with Chen was overheard by other personnel, including Williams, who reminded Nancy that her role was limited to equipment preparation rather than tactical consultation. His intervention was professionally appropriate, but highlighted the disconnect between organizational restrictions and operational needs. Nancy's expertise was clearly relevant to mission success, but institutional barriers prevented its application. As afternoon approached and weather conditions continued to deteriorate, the urgency of the rescue operation intensified. Outpost 7's situation was becoming increasingly desperate as ammunition ran low and casualties mounted from sustained enemy pressure. The patrol needed immediate extraction, but conventional approaches had proven ineffective against the entrenched enemy positions. Colonel Webb authorized an attempt using long-range sniper support to suppress enemy positions while helicopters approached the extraction point. The plan required Phantom Squad to establish overwatch positions at maximum effective range and engage targets that threatened the rescue aircraft. The shooting would be extraordinarily challenging, requiring perfect execution under combat conditions. selected the most advantageous position available for the sniper operation, a ridgeline approximately 1,400 meters from the target area. The range was at the extreme limit of effective precision shooting, requiring exceptional skills and optimal equipment performance. Environmental conditions included variable winds and changing light that would complicate target acquisition and engagement. Nancy prepared the specialized rifles and ammunition that Phantom Squad would use for the mission, knowing that equipment performance could determine the difference between success and failure. Her selection of ammunition lots and scope adjustments incorporated every aspect of her ballistics knowledge, optimizing performance for the specific environmental conditions and engagement parameters. As Phantom Squad departed for their mission, Nancy remained in the armory monitoring communications and preparing for their return. The radio traffic revealed the extreme difficulty of the shooting conditions and the extraordinary skill required to achieve effective results at such extended range. The fate of Outpost 7 depended on precision that challenged the limits of human capability. The first engagement reports were not encouraging. Phantom Squad had reached their position and begun engaging targets, but the extreme range and difficult conditions were preventing the accuracy needed to effectively suppress enemy positions. The rescue helicopters remained grounded as enemy fire continued to dominate the extraction zone, leaving Outpost 7 trapped and running out of time. Nancy heard the desperation in Master Sergeant Park's voice as he reported through the radio static that Phantom Squad was unable to achieve the precision needed to suppress enemy positions effectively. The extreme range and shifting wind conditions were preventing accurate engagement, while the enemy maintained their blocking positions around Outpost 7's defensive perimeter. Time was running out for the trapped reconnaissance patrol as ammunition dwindled and casualties mounted. Colonel Webb's response was immediate and decisive. He ordered Phantom Squad to maintain their position while he explored alternative options. But the reality was stark: no other qualified sniper assets were available at Camp Riverside, and requesting reinforcements from other installations would take hours that Outpost 7 didn't have. The mathematical precision required for effective fire at 1,400 meters was proving beyond even the skills of the base's most experienced marksman. Nancy stood in the armory, listening to the communications traffic while every instinct in her body screamed for action. She understood the ballistics requirements better than anyone on the base, had studied the terrain extensively, and possessed shooting skills that exceeded many qualified snipers. But the restrictions placed on her role made any suggestion of participation impossible through official channels. The radio crackled with increasingly urgent updates from Outpost 7. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, the patrol leader, reported that Private Martinez had been severely wounded and required immediate medical evacuation. The patrol was down to their last magazines of ammunition and couldn't maintain their defensive position much longer against the sustained enemy pressure. Rodriguez's voice carried the weight of a leader watching his soldiers face inevitable capture or death. Nancy began calculating engagement parameters in her head, analyzing wind vectors from the latest meteorological reports and incorporating elevation data she'd memorized from months of studying the operational area. Her mental calculations revealed that the shot was difficult, but achievable with proper compensation for environmental factors and precise range estimation. The margin for error was minimal, but the shot was within the realm of possibility for someone with her level of preparation. Williams noticed Nancy's intense focus on the radio communications and reminded her that her responsibility was equipment maintenance rather than tactical analysis. His reminder was delivered without malice, but reflected the institutional blindness that prevented recognition of her capabilities. Nancy acknowledged his guidance while internally wrestling with the knowledge that she possessed skills that could save lives, but was forbidden from applying them. The second wave of Phantom Squad's engagement attempts produced similarly disappointing results. Chun's voice came through the radio reporting near misses that demonstrated the extreme difficulty of achieving precision at such range under combat conditions. The enemy positions remained active, continuing to suppress any attempt at helicopter extraction while Outpost 7's situation grew increasingly desperate. Nancy made a decision that would either end her military career or validate everything she'd worked toward for years. She quietly gathered her personal shooting equipment from her quarters, including the custom rifle she'd assembled and calibrated during countless hours at the auxiliary range. Her movements were deliberate and calm as she prepared gear that she'd hoped would never be needed, but had maintained in perfect readiness. The challenge wasn't just physical but psychological. Nancy had to overcome not only the technical demands of an impossible shot, but also the institutional barriers that had convinced others she was unsuitable for high-pressure situations. Her hands remained steady as she checked her equipment, a marked contrast to the trembling that appeared during formal evaluations. The difference between artificial stress and real crisis was finally becoming apparent. Nancy left the armory without authorization, using service corridors and maintenance routes to avoid detection while moving toward the base perimeter. Her knowledge of the facility's layout, gained through months of equipment inspections and routine duties, allowed her to navigate without encountering personnel who might question her activities. She reached the perimeter fence at a location where earlier reconnaissance had identified potential exit points. The hike to an effective shooting position would take 2 hours through terrain that Nancy had studied extensively but never actually traversed. Her route planning incorporated elevation changes, concealment requirements, and positioning factors that would optimize her angle of engagement while minimizing exposure to potential counterfire. Every aspect of her movement was calculated to maximize the probability of reaching an effective firing position undetected. Nancy's radio remained tuned to the tactical frequency as she moved through the darkness toward her selected position. The communications traffic painted an increasingly grim picture of Outpost 7's situation, with ammunition nearly exhausted and the wounded soldier's condition deteriorating rapidly. Park's continued reports of ineffective long-range engagements underscored the desperate need for a solution that conventional assets couldn't provide. The terrain proved as challenging as Nancy had anticipated, with loose rock that threatened to reveal her position and elevation changes that tested her physical conditioning. Her months of preparation and training enabled her to maintain pace while carrying the equipment necessary for precision shooting at extreme range. The weight of her gear was significant, but her conditioning was adequate for the demands of the movement. As Nancy approached her selected firing position, she could hear the distant sound of gunfire from the engagement area. The acoustic signature confirmed the intensity of the firefight and the urgency of the situation facing Outpost 7. Her calculations had brought her to a position approximately 1,200 meters from the enemy positions, a range that was still extremely challenging but within her capabilities. Given optimal conditions, Nancy established her shooting position with methodical precision, using techniques she'd practiced countless times at the auxiliary range. Her rifle was equipped with a precision scope that she'd calibrated personally, and her ammunition selection incorporated every aspect of her ballistics knowledge. The setup process was conducted with the careful attention to detail that had characterized all her preparation over the preceding months. The environmental conditions at her position were marginal for precision shooting at such range. Variable winds required constant adjustment and compensation, while the fading daylight created visibility challenges that complicated target acquisition. Nancy used her meteorological knowledge to read wind patterns and her understanding of atmospheric conditions to optimize her scope settings for the specific engagement parameters. Nancy's first priority was identifying the enemy positions that were preventing helicopter extraction of Outpost 7. Through her scope, she could observe muzzle flashes and movement that revealed the locations of hostile forces. Her analysis of the tactical situation confirmed that neutralizing key positions could create a window of opportunity for rescue operations to succeed. The radio traffic indicated that another helicopter extraction attempt was being prepared, timed to coincide with Phantom Squad's continued suppressive fire. Nancy understood that this might be the last opportunity to save Outpost 7 before darkness made rescue operations impossible. Her unauthorized intervention would need to be perfectly timed to maximize its effectiveness. Nancy keyed her radio. For the first time since leaving the base, announcing her presence on the tactical frequency. Her transmission shocked the command center personnel, who had assumed she was still in the armory performing her assigned duties. Colonel Webb's immediate response was an order for her to return to base immediately, but Nancy had already committed to a course of action that couldn't be reversed. Park's voice came through the radio, expressing disbelief that Nancy was in a position to engage targets at such range. His knowledge of her technical expertise was balanced against skepticism about her practical shooting capabilities, creating uncertainty about whether her intervention would help or complicate the rescue operation. Nancy responded by providing her exact position and requesting coordination with the planned extraction attempt. The moment of truth was approaching as Nancy settled into her final shooting position and began her engagement sequence. Her breathing was controlled, her position was stable, and her mental preparation was complete. The shot that would either validate her years of preparation or confirm her critics' doubts about her capabilities was only moments away. Nancy's scope settled on the primary enemy position that commanded the extraction zone, a machine gun nest approximately 1,247 meters from her location, according to her laser rangefinder. The target was partially concealed behind rocky cover, with only intermittent exposure as the gunner adjusted his position to engage different sectors. Nancy would have one opportunity when the gunner shifted to target the approaching rescue helicopter. The wind conditions were the most challenging variable in her calculation matrix. Surface winds at her position indicated a gentle breeze from the southwest, but the bullet's trajectory would carry it through different atmospheric layers with varying wind speeds and directions. Nancy used her knowledge of meteorological patterns in the area to estimate crosswind effects at different points along the bullet's path, incorporating calculations she'd practiced hundreds of times during her private training sessions. Through her earpiece, Nancy heard the rescue helicopter pilot reporting his approach to the extraction zone. The aircraft was flying low through the valley system to minimize exposure time, but it would need to climb and hover in the open for nearly 2 minutes to extract Outpost 7. During that vulnerable period, enemy fire would be concentrated and deadly unless key positions were neutralized. Precisely when the helicopter became visible, Nancy's breathing settled into the rhythm she'd perfected during countless training sessions, each exhale measured and controlled to minimize movement during the critical moments before firing. Her pulse remained steady despite the magnitude of the shot she was attempting and the career-ending consequences she would face regardless of the outcome. The technical challenge demanded every aspect of her preparation and skill. The radio crackled with Park's voice coordinating the timing of Phantom Squad's suppressive fire with the helicopter's approach. Nancy inserted herself into the coordination sequence, announcing that she would engage the primary machine gun position on the helicopter pilots. Call of 30 seconds out. Her transmission was met with silence from the command frequency, but Park acknowledged her input with professional brevity that indicated his acceptance of her participation. Nancy's scope tracked the enemy position as she waited for the engagement signal, noting the pattern of the gunner's movements and identifying the precise moment when he would be most exposed. Her calculations indicated that the bullet would require approximately 1.8 seconds of flight time, meaning she needed to anticipate the target's position rather than respond to his current location. The prediction demanded perfect timing and understanding of human movement patterns under combat stress. The helicopter pilot's voice cut through the radio static, 30 seconds out, beginning final approach. Nancy's crosshairs settled on the predicted position where the enemy gunner would appear when he shifted to engage the approaching aircraft. Her finger found the trigger's second stage as she completed her final breathing cycle and began the slow, steady pressure that would release the shot. Nancy fired at the precise moment her calculations indicated optimal target exposure. The rifle's recoil absorbed by her stable shooting position as the bullet began its journey across nearly 1,300 meters of variable terrain and atmosphere. The muzzle blast and recoil were familiar sensations from thousands of practice rounds, but this shot carried consequences that extended far beyond training scenarios. Through her scope, Nancy tracked the bullet's impact point and immediately observed the cessation of fire from the primary enemy position. The machine gunner had been neutralized at the critical moment, creating a gap in the enemy's defensive coverage that the rescue helicopter could exploit. Her shot had achieved its intended effect with precision that vindicated years of preparation and study. The helicopter pilot reported that he was taking reduced fire as he approached the extraction zone, confirming that Nancy's engagement had created the tactical advantage needed for a successful rescue attempt. Park's voice came through the radio acknowledging the effectiveness of her shot while coordinating continued suppressive fire from Phantom Squad's position. The rescue operation was proceeding according to plan. Nancy immediately shifted her scope to identify secondary targets that continued to threaten the extraction. Her analysis of the enemy's defensive layout revealed 2 additional positions that could interfere with the helicopter's escape route once Outpost 7 was loaded aboard. The ranges were similar to her first engagement, requiring the same level of precision but with different environmental compensation due to varying target angles. The rescue helicopter had reached Outpost 7's position and was beginning the extraction process when enemy fire from a flanking position forced the pilot to take evasive action. Nancy identified the source of the fire through her scope and began calculating engagement parameters for a shot that would eliminate this new threat to the rescue operation. Nancy's second shot engaged an enemy rifleman who was targeting the helicopter from a concealed position among the rocks. The range was 1,312 meters with a significant crosswind component that required substantial lead and windage compensation. Nancy's bullet found its target as the enemy fighter attempted to line up a shot on the hovering aircraft, removing another threat to the extraction. The radio traffic indicated that Outpost 7's personnel were being loaded aboard the rescue helicopter, with the wounded soldier receiving immediate medical attention from the aircraft's medic. Rodriguez's voice came through the communications confirming that all patrol members were accounted for and ready for extraction. The rescue was succeeding, but the helicopter remained vulnerable during its climb out of the valley. Nancy maintained overwatch as the helicopter lifted off with its precious cargo, tracking potential threats along the aircraft's escape route. Her position provided excellent visibility of the withdrawal path, allowing her to identify and engage any enemy positions that attempted to target the departing aircraft. Her role had evolved from unauthorized intervention to critical fire support. For the successful completion of the rescue mission, the helicopter pilot reported clear of the immediate threat area and climbing towards safe altitude as Nancy continued to scan for targets through her scope. Enemy forces were beginning to withdraw from their positions as they recognized that their tactical advantage had been neutralized by precision fire from an unknown source. The rescue operation had succeeded against overwhelming odds. Park's voice came through the radio requesting Nancy's status and position as Phantom Squad prepared to withdraw from their overwatch location. Nancy reported that she was prepared to provide continued fire support during their movement, but that enemy activity appeared to be diminishing as hostile forces disengaged from the area. The immediate crisis was resolving with all friendly personnel accounted for and safe. Nancy began her own withdrawal from the shooting position, carefully policing her brass and ensuring that no evidence of her presence would remain for potential enemy discovery. Her movement back toward Camp Riverside would be conducted with the same operational security that had characterized her approach, using terrain masking and concealment to avoid detection until she reached the base perimeter. The communications. Traffic during Nancy's return movement focused on the successful extraction of Outpost 7 and the medical treatment being provided to the wounded soldier. The mission had succeeded through a combination of conventional tactics and unconventional intervention that had overcome seemingly impossible odds. Nancy's unauthorized participation had proven decisive in creating the conditions necessary for rescue. As Nancy approached the base perimeter, she could see increased activity at the helicopter landing pad where medical personnel were preparing to receive the rescued patrol. Emergency vehicles and command staff were positioning themselves to support the incoming aircraft and coordinate follow-up operations. The successful rescue had mobilized the entire base in support of their returning personnel. Nancy re-entered the base through the same route she had used for her departure, moving carefully to avoid immediate detection while understanding that her absence from assigned duties would soon be discovered. Her unauthorized action had saved lives and proven her capabilities, but it had also constituted serious violations of military regulations that would demand official response. The radio continued to carry updates about Outpost 7's condition and the medical treatment being provided to the wounded soldier. All patrol members were reported in stable condition, with the most seriously injured soldier responding well to treatment. The rescue had succeeded completely, with no additional casualties during the extraction phase. Nancy reached the armory. As the rescue helicopter was touching down on the landing pad, its successful mission representing vindication of her decision to act despite official restrictions. Her equipment was quickly secured and her appearance restored to regulation standards before anyone noticed her return. The next phase of consequences was about to begin. Nancy was cleaning her personal rifle in the armory when Colonel Webb's voice echoed through the base communication system, ordering her to report to his office immediately. The tone carried unmistakable authority and barely controlled anger, confirming that her unauthorized departure and participation in the rescue operation had been discovered. Williams looked up from his desk with an expression that mixed concern and resignation, understanding that Nancy's career was about to face its most critical test. The walk to Webb's office felt longer than usual as Nancy considered the range of consequences she might face. Courts-martial for disobeying direct orders, discharge for unauthorized absence from duty, or disciplinary action that would end any possibility of career advancement were all realistic possibilities. Her successful intervention had saved Outpost 7, but military discipline demanded accountability for violations of regulations. Regardless of outcomes, Webb's office was crowded when Nancy arrived, with Captain Torres, Major Harrison from the Inspector General's office, and Master Sergeant Park all present for what would clearly be a formal inquiry. The assembled officials represented different aspects of the military justice system, suggesting that the investigation would be thorough and the potential consequences severe. Nancy reported as ordered and assumed the position of attention while waiting for the proceedings to begin. Colonel Webb's opening statement was measured but stern, outlining the serious nature of Nancy's violations and the potential impact on unit discipline and operational security. He emphasized that unauthorized absence from assigned duties, violation of established restrictions, and participation in combat operations without proper authorization represented fundamental breaches of military order that could not be overlooked, regardless of personal motivations or tactical outcomes. Webb's questions began with establishing the basic facts of Nancy's actions when she had left her assigned post, how she had accessed the operational area, and what equipment she had used during her unauthorized mission. Nancy answered each question directly and completely, taking full responsibility for her decisions, without attempting to justify or minimize her violations of regulations and direct orders. Major Harrison's questions focused on Nancy's understanding of the restrictions that had been placed on her activities and her reasons for choosing to violate those limitations. His inquiry was designed to determine whether her actions represented momentary poor judgment or deliberate disregard for authority that indicated deeper disciplinary problems. Nancy explained that she had understood the restrictions completely, but believed that saving lives justified accepting personal consequences. Captain Torres questioned Nancy about her assessment of her own qualifications for the mission she had undertaken, particularly given the formal evaluations that had determined she was unsuitable for advanced marksmanship roles. Torres's questions carried implications about Nancy's judgment and whether her self-assessment was realistic or represented dangerous overconfidence that could have endangered the rescue operation. Nancy's response was carefully measured, acknowledging that her formal evaluations had indicated problems with performance under pressure, while explaining that her private training and preparation had addressed those limitations. She provided specific details about her shooting capabilities, ballistics knowledge, and familiarity with the operational area that had enabled her successful intervention. Master Sergeant Park's questions approached the situation from a tactical perspective, focusing on Nancy's understanding of the engagement parameters and her coordination with existing fire support elements. His inquiry was more technical than disciplinary, reflecting professional interest in how Nancy had achieved precision that exceeded the capabilities of qualified snipers operating under similar conditions. Park's questions revealed that Nancy's understanding of ballistics, environmental compensation, and target engagement was comprehensive and accurate. Her calculations for wind compensation, range estimation, and timing had been mathematically precise and tactically sound. The technical competence she demonstrated during the engagement matched or exceeded that of personnel in advanced marksmanship roles. The inquiry turned to the broader implications of Nancy's actions for unit discipline and organizational structure. Webb emphasized that allowing personnel to exceed their assigned roles based on personal assessment of their capabilities would undermine the entire system of military specialization and command authority. Nancy's success in this instance couldn't justify a precedent that would encourage others to disregard restrictions and pursue unauthorized missions. Nancy acknowledged the validity of concerns about discipline and precedent while maintaining that exceptional circumstances sometimes required exceptional responses. She emphasized that her decision had been based on unique knowledge and capabilities that weren't available through conventional channels, not on general dissatisfaction with her assigned role or desire for advancement. The discussion revealed tension between recognizing Nancy's technical competence and maintaining institutional authority. Her successful intervention had clearly saved lives and demonstrated capabilities that exceeded her official qualifications, but accepting her actions would challenge the systems used to evaluate and assign personnel to specialized roles. Major Harrison raised questions about the evaluation processes that had repeatedly rejected Nancy's applications for advanced training, given the demonstration of capabilities she had provided during the rescue operation. His inquiry suggested that institutional assessment methods might not accurately identify all qualified personnel, creating potential gaps in utilization of available talent. Webb's response emphasized that evaluation systems were designed to identify personnel who could perform reliably under controlled conditions rather than those who might succeed in exceptional circumstances. He maintained that Nancy's success during one unauthorized mission didn't validate her suitability for regular assignment to advanced roles that required consistent performance under various conditions. The inquiry addressed the disconnect between Nancy's formal evaluation results and her demonstrated capabilities during the rescue operation. Her nervousness during official assessments contrasted sharply with her steady performance during actual combat conditions. suggesting that evaluation environments might not accurately predict operational effectiveness for all personnel. Captain Torres suggested that Nancy's case highlighted potential limitations in current assessment methods that might be preventing optimal utilization of available capabilities. She recommended reviewing evaluation protocols to ensure that artificial testing environments didn't exclude personnel who could contribute effectively to mission success under real-world conditions. The discussion continued for over 2 hours, as the assembled officials wrestled with balancing disciplinary requirements against recognition of exceptional performance. Nancy's violations were clear and significant, but her results had directly saved American lives through capabilities that hadn't been recognized or utilized through conventional channels. Park provided a detailed assessment of Nancy's tactical performance during the rescue operation, emphasizing that her precision shooting and tactical coordination had exceeded professional standards for qualified snipers. His evaluation carried significant weight as an experienced marksman who understood the technical demands of the engagements Nancy had successfully completed. The inquiry concluded with Webb announcing that a decision regarding Nancy's future would be made after consultation with higher command and review of relevant regulations. Nancy was dismissed with instructions to remain available for additional questioning and to continue her assigned duties pending final determination of disciplinary action. As Nancy left Webb's office, she encountered Staff Sergeant Rodriguez from Outpost 7, who was waiting to provide his own testimony about the rescue operation. Rodriguez stopped her briefly to express his personal gratitude for her intervention, noting that her precision fire had been directly responsible for saving his wounded soldier and enabling the successful extraction of his entire patrol. Rodriguez's acknowledgement provided personal validation for Nancy's decision, but it also highlighted the human cost that would have resulted from strict adherence to regulations and restrictions. His wounded soldier was recovering because Nancy had chosen to act despite institutional barriers, creating a moral complexity that transcended simple questions of discipline and authority. Nancy returned to the armory knowing that her military career hung in the balance while understanding that she would make the same decision again under similar circumstances. Her unauthorized intervention had proven her capabilities and saved lives, but it had also challenged fundamental assumptions about evaluation, assignment, and the relationship between formal qualifications and actual competence. The investigation would continue as officials attempted to balance competing demands of discipline, recognition, and institutional integrity. Nancy's fate would depend on whether the military justice system could accommodate exceptional performance that occurred outside conventional frameworks and whether her demonstrated capabilities would finally overcome the limitations that had defined her career. 3 weeks after the rescue operation, Nancy stood outside Colonel Webb's office for what she understood would be the final determination of her military future. The investigation had been thorough and comprehensive, involving testimony from multiple witnesses, technical analysis of her shooting performance, and review of her complete service record. The decision she was about to receive would either end her career in disgrace or fundamentally transform her role within the military structure. The office was arranged differently than during her previous appearances, with Webb seated behind his desk while General Patricia Morrison, the installation's commanding officer, occupied the chair typically reserved for visiting officials. Morrison's presence indicated that Nancy's case had attracted attention at levels far above the base command, suggesting that the implications extended beyond individual disciplinary action to broader questions about personnel evaluation and utilization. General Morrison opened the proceedings by acknowledging the complexity of Nancy's situation and the competing interests that had influenced the investigation. She emphasized that military discipline required accountability for violations of orders and regulations, but also noted that exceptional circumstances sometimes revealed capabilities that weren't captured through conventional assessment methods. Nancy's case had become a test of the military's ability to balance these competing requirements. The general statement outlined the investigation's findings, confirming that Nancy had violated multiple regulations through her unauthorized departure and participation in combat operations. The violations were serious and unambiguous, representing clear breaches of military discipline that typically resulted in courts-martial or administrative discharge. However, the investigation had also confirmed that Nancy's intervention had been tactically sound and directly responsible for saving American lives. Webb presented the technical analysis of Nancy's shooting performance during the rescue operation, which had been conducted by qualified instructors from the Army Marksmanship Unit. Their evaluation confirmed that Nancy's precision shooting had exceeded professional standards for qualified snipers, with shot placement and timing that demonstrated exceptional skill under combat conditions. The technical assessment validated Nancy's claims about her capabilities while raising questions about previous evaluation results. Morrison addressed the disconnect between Nancy's formal assessment history and her demonstrated performance, noting that the investigation had revealed systematic limitations in evaluation methods that might be preventing optimal utilization of available personnel. Nancy's case had highlighted potential gaps between testing environments and operational requirements that could affect multiple soldiers throughout the military system. The general announced that Nancy's disciplinary action would consist of formal reprimand for violations of regulations and unauthorized absence from assigned duties. The reprimand would remain in her personnel file as a permanent record of her infractions, but it would not result in reduction in rank, loss of pay, or separation from service. The punishment was significant, but designed to maintain her career viability while acknowledging the seriousness of her violations. Morrison continued by announcing Nancy's immediate reassignment to the newly established Precision Marksmanship Development Program, a specialized unit tasked with identifying and developing advanced shooting capabilities throughout the installation. Her role would involve both operational duties as a qualified sniper and instructional responsibilities for improving marksmanship training across multiple units. The assignment represented complete transformation of Nancy's career trajectory, moving her from restricted logistics duties to advanced operational roles that utilized her demonstrated capabilities. Webb explained that the new position would require her to complete formal sniper qualification training, despite her proven abilities, to ensure compliance with military certification requirements and institutional standards. Nancy's training schedule would be accelerated to account for her existing knowledge and skills, but she would still need to demonstrate proficiency in all required areas under formal evaluation conditions. The training would also include leadership development and instructional techniques that would prepare her for mentoring other soldiers who showed potential for advanced marksmanship roles. General Morrison emphasized that Nancy's new assignment came with increased responsibilities and higher performance expectations. Her success in proving that evaluation systems could miss qualified personnel also created obligations to help identify and develop similar capabilities in others. The military was investing in her potential while expecting significant returns. Through improved overall marksmanship capabilities, the transformation extended beyond Nancy's individual situation to broader changes in evaluation and assessment protocols. Morrison announced that Nancy's case would serve as the foundation for reviewing current methods and developing improved approaches that could better identify personnel with exceptional potential. Her experience would inform systemic improvements designed to prevent similar situations in the future. Webb presented Nancy with her new orders and explained the timeline for her transition to the Precision Marksmanship Development Program. She would begin formal sniper training the following Monday while maintaining her current security clearance and base assignment. The accelerated schedule would allow her to achieve full qualification within 6 weeks rather than the standard 12-week program. Nancy's first assignment in her new role would involve analyzing the marksmanship capabilities of personnel throughout the installation and identifying candidates for advanced training. Her technical knowledge and understanding of evaluation limitations would be valuable for recognizing potential that might not be apparent through conventional assessments. The work would combine her analytical skills with her operational experience. Meeting concluded with Morrison's observation that Nancy's case demonstrated the importance of persistence and preparation in pursuing professional goals. Her years of private training and study had created the capabilities that enabled her successful intervention, proving that dedication could overcome institutional barriers when combined with exceptional circumstances. Her example would inspire other soldiers to pursue excellence beyond their assigned roles. As Nancy left Webb's office with her new orders, she encountered Sergeant Kim waiting in the corridor. Kim had been instrumental in her development as a marksman and had supported her through years of rejection and limitation. His presence at this moment represented continuity between her struggles and her ultimate success. Acknowledging the role that unofficial mentorship had played in her development, Kim's congratulations were heartfelt and personal, reflecting his recognition of the journey Nancy had completed from overlooked logistics specialist to recognized marksmanship expert. He had observed her dedication during countless hours at the auxiliary range and understood the persistence required to maintain preparation without guarantee of opportunity. Her success validated his belief in her potential. Nancy returned to the armory to collect her personal equipment and complete the transition to her new assignment. Williams greeted her with professional courtesy and genuine respect, acknowledging that her transformation reflected positively on the Armory's commitment to developing personnel beyond their assigned duties. Her success had elevated the reputation of their entire unit. The news of Nancy's reassignment spread quickly throughout the base, generating discussions about the relationship between formal qualifications and actual capabilities. Personnel who had dismissed her based on her evaluation history were forced to reconsider their assumptions about competence and potential. Her transformation challenged comfortable certainties about who deserved opportunities and why. Staff Sergeant Chen sought Nancy out to express his satisfaction with her recognition and advancement. His support during her most difficult period had provided crucial validation when institutional channels offered only restriction and limitation. Chen's acknowledgement of her journey emphasized the importance of peer recognition in maintaining motivation during challenging circumstances. Rodriguez and the other members of Outpost 7 made a point of thanking Nancy personally for her intervention during their rescue. Their gratitude was immediate and sincere, representing the human dimension of her technical achievements. The lives she had saved through her unauthorized action provided moral justification that transcended regulatory concerns and institutional politics. Nancy's transformation from nervous Nancy to recognized marksmanship expert was complete. But her new responsibilities demanded continued growth and development. Her success had created opportunities while establishing expectations for contributing to the success of others. The reputation she had fought years to establish now carried obligations to prove that her advancement had been justified through continued exceptional performance. The perfect shot that had saved Outpost 7 became the foundation for a career that finally matched Nancy's capabilities and aspirations. Her journey from overlooked specialist to respected expert demonstrated that persistence, preparation, and courage could overcome institutional barriers when combined with exceptional circumstances. The woman they had called Nervous Nancy had proven that steady hands mattered more than steady nerves, and that true marksmanship was measured by results rather than reputation. Her story would become part of Camp Riverside's history, inspiring future soldiers to pursue excellence beyond their assigned roles, while challenging supervisors to recognize potential that might not fit conventional patterns. Nancy had not only proven herself, but had also improved the system that had initially failed to recognize her worth. 2 years later, Sergeant First Class Nancy Chen stood before a classroom of aspiring snipers, her instructor badge gleaming alongside ribbons that told the story of her transformation. The tremor in her hands had never completely disappeared during formal presentations, but now her students saw it differently, as proof that courage wasn't the absence of nervousness, but action despite it. The shot that matters most, she told her students, isn't the one you make when everything's perfect. It's the one you take when everything depends on it, when conventional wisdom says it's impossible, and when everyone expects you to fail. Private. Sarah Kim raised her hand from the back row. Sergeant, what if people don't believe in your abilities? Nancy smiled, remembering her own journey from overlooked armorer to respected instructor. Then you prepare in silence, prove your worth through excellence, and wait for the moment when capability matters more than reputation. That moment will come. The question is, will you be ready? Her students nodded, understanding that they were. Learning from someone who had lived every lesson she taught, Nancy had become more than an instructor. She was proof that dedication could overcome dismissal, that preparation could triumph over prejudice, and that sometimes the most important shot comes from the most unexpected source. The woman they once called Nervous Nancy had indeed made the perfect shot, not just on that ridge overlooking Outpost 7, but in rebuilding perceptions about what courage really looks like. What's your impossible shot? What moment are you preparing for that others say will never come? Every one of us faces that moment when we're underestimated, overlooked, or told we're not enough. Nancy's story reminds us that preparation meets opportunity, but only if we're brave enough to take the shot when it matters most. If this story inspired you to believe in your own potential, hit that subscribe button and join our community of everyday heroes. Share your own story of proving doubters wrong in the comments below. We read every single one. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss stories that remind you the world needs your unique capabilities, even if others haven't recognized them yet. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments and let's build a global community of people who refuse to accept limitations.